The morning sun cast long shadows across Settlement Alpha 7 as Jiho Kim pressed her small face against the window of her family's housing unit. The 8-year-old girl watched the security patrol march past in their dark uniforms, their weapons gleaming in the early light. She counted them silently. 1, 2, 3, 4 soldiers. The same number that went out yesterday. The same number that came back, but it had not always been this way. Jiho's mother, Heejin Lee, worked in the medical center at the heart of the settlement. Every morning she would kiss Jiho goodbye and walk the safe paths between the buildings, her medical bag swinging at her side. The paths were marked with bright yellow paint and everyone knew to stay within the lines. Beyond the yellow paint lay the wilderness of Kepler 442b, and in that wilderness lived the thing that made grown men shake with fear, the albino panther. Jiho had never seen the creature, but she had heard the stories. Every child in the settlement knew about the white beast that stood as tall as 2 men. They whispered about its glowing amber eyes that could see in the darkest night. They talked about its silent steps that made no sound on the forest floor. Most of all, they feared its intelligence. This was not just an animal that hunted for food. This was something that thought, something that planned, something that killed with purpose. Uncle Sang-min worked as the head of colonial security. He was a big man with kind eyes, but when people talked about the albino panther, those eyes became hard and worried. Jiho had seen him studying maps late into the night, marking places where the creature had been spotted. Red X marks covered the paper like drops of blood. 3 settlements had fallen to the beast over the past 10 years, not destroyed completely, but abandoned when too many people died. The survivors would pack their belongings and move to safer places, leaving behind empty buildings and bad memories. Settlement Alpha 7 was one of the last safe places on this part of the planet. The colonial records told a story that made no sense to anyone. 47 people had died in attacks over the years. Every single one had been carrying a weapon. Soldiers, hunters, security guards, all dead. But the creature had walked past unarmed civilians without touching them. It had been seen near playgrounds full of children and had simply watched before disappearing back into the forest. Dong Wu Chang knew more about the albino panther than anyone else still alive. The old hunter had tracked the beast for 8 years. He had seen its footprints in the mud after rain. He had found trees marked by its claws, scratches too high for any normal animal to make. Most importantly, he had looked into its eyes and lived to tell about it. It knows things, Dongwu would say when people asked him about the creature. It knows which of us carry guns. It knows which of us mean harm. It watches us like we watch it. The hunter had thick scars on his left arm from their first meeting. He had been tracking a different animal when the albino panther appeared between the trees like a ghost made real. For a long moment, they had stared at each other. Dongwu's rifle had been in his hands, but something about the creature's gaze had stopped him from shooting. Intelligence looked back at him from those amber eyes, not animal cunning but real thought. Then the panther had attacked, not to kill, but to teach. Its claws had raked across Dongwu's arm before it vanished back into the shadows. The message was clear. I could have killed you, but I chose not to. Do not hunt me again. Dongwu had ignored the warning. He was a hunter, and this was the greatest hunt of his life. But every time he got close, the creature would disable his equipment. Radio destroyed with surgical precision. Traps dismantled and left in neat piles. Trail cameras smashed but not taken. The albino panther was playing with him, showing its intelligence like a cat playing with a mouse. The morning briefing in the security center was the same as always. Sang-min stood before a room full of officers pointing at a large map on the wall. Recent sightings were marked with yellow pins. Each pin represented fear, each location a place where someone had seen white fur moving through the green forest. 3 new sightings this week, Sang-min announced. His voice was steady, but everyone could hear the worry underneath. Section 7, near the old mining road. Section 12, close to the water treatment plant. And Section 4, just 2 kilometers from the settlement boundary. The officers shifted in their seats. Section 4 was too close. Their families lived here. Their children played in the safe zones marked with yellow paint. The pattern is the same, Sang-min continued. The creature observes but does not attack unless approached by armed personnel. However, we cannot assume this behavior will continue. All patrols will now travel in groups of 4 minimum. No exceptions. After the briefing, Sang-min walked home through the safe paths. The yellow paint looked fresh in the morning light, but he knew it was just paint. It would not stop the Albino Panther if the creature decided to enter the settlement. Nothing would stop it except bullets. And bullets had failed before. At home, Jiho was eating breakfast while her mother prepared for work. The little girl looked up when her uncle entered the kitchen. She could see the worry in his face, the same expression he wore every day now. "Uncle Sang-min, will the White Panther come to our house?" Jiho asked. Her mother stopped packing her medical bag. The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Sang-min knelt down to Jiho's level. "No, little one. The creature has never hurt anyone who was not carrying a weapon. You and your mother are safe." But even as he said the words, Sang-min wondered if they were true. The Albino Panther's behavior made no sense. Animals did not choose their victims based on whether they carried weapons. Animals did not disable electronic equipment or avoid traps with such precision. This was something else. Something that thought and planned and remembered. The weekend brought rare good weather to Kepler 442b. The two suns aligned perfectly, casting warm light across the landscape. Families in Settlement Alpha 7 decided to take advantage of the beautiful day. Some went to the community gardens. Others visited the safe recreational areas near the settlement. Hyejin suggested a camping trip to the approved camping ground, just 5 kilometers from the settlement. It was well within the safe zone, marked clearly with yellow paint and protected by sensor arrays. Uncle Sang-min had checked the security reports personally. No albino panther sightings within 20 kilometers of the camping area in over 2 years. Jiho was excited about the adventure. She packed her small backpack with careful precision, including her favorite book about space explorers and a stuffed animal that looked like a friendly alien. The camping ground had real trees and a small stream where she could look for interesting rocks. They set up their tent near the stream in the late afternoon. Other families were already there, their children playing games and their parents preparing dinner over portable cooking units. The air smelled like pine needles and clean water. For a few hours it was easy to forget about the white terror that lived in the deep forest. As evening approached, dark clouds began to gather above the trees. The weather report had not predicted rain, but storms could appear quickly on Kepler 442b. The wind picked up, making the tent walls flutter like trapped birds. "We should pack up," Hyejin said, looking at the darkening sky. "The storm looks like it will be strong." But before they could take down the tent, rain began to fall. Not gentle drops, but heavy sheets of water that turned the camping ground into a muddy mess. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the ground itself. In the chaos of the sudden storm, families ran for their vehicles. Parents grabbed children and equipment, trying to escape before the roads became too dangerous to drive. The camping ground emptied quickly, leaving behind scattered belongings and abandoned tents. Jiho had been playing near the stream when the storm hit. She ran toward where their tent had been, but in the rain and darkness, everything looked the same. Trees that had been friendly in the daylight now looked like monsters reaching toward her with twisted arms. She called for her mother, but the wind stole her voice and threw it away into the forest. The yellow paint that marked the safe paths was invisible in the storm. Jiho was alone in the wilderness of Kepler 442b, where the albino panther ruled the night. The little girl found shelter under a large tree and waited for the storm to pass. She did not know that 20 kilometers away, the creature that had terrorized 3 settlements was already moving through the forest. Drawn by instincts it did not fully understand toward a lost child who carried no weapons and meant no harm. The storm passed after 2 hours, but to Jiho it felt like 2 days. She sat under the big tree, her small body shaking from cold and fear. Her clothes were soaked through, and her stuffed alien toy was muddy and wet. When the rain finally stopped, and strange silence filled the forest. Jiho had never heard such quiet before. In the settlement there were always sounds, machines humming, people talking, vehicles moving on the roads. But here in the wilderness, the only sounds were water, dripping from leaves and her own breathing. Even the wind had stopped. She stood up on shaky legs and looked around. The storm had changed everything. Fallen branches blocked the paths she remembered. The stream had become a rushing river, too dangerous to cross. Worst of all, the yellow paint markers that showed the safe zones had been washed away by the rain. "Mama?" Jiho called softly. Her voice sounded tiny in the vast forest. "Uncle Sang-min, where are you?" No answer came back. She was alone. Meanwhile, back at Settlement Alpha 7, Hyejin was in the security center with her brother Sang-min. Her face was pale with worry, and her hands shook as she held a cup of hot tea. She had searched the camping ground 3 times, calling Jiho's name until her voice was gone. "Tell me again what happened," Sang-min said gently. He was trying to stay calm for his sister, but inside he was terrified. A lost child in the wilderness was every parent's worst nightmare. A lost child in a forest where the albino panther hunted was something even worse. Jiho was playing by the stream when the storm hit, Yejin said. "I was packing our tent. When I looked for her, she was gone. I thought she ran to the car, but she was not there. I searched everywhere, Sang-min. Everywhere." Dong-woo Chang entered the security center carrying his tracking equipment. The old hunter looked grim. "I found small footprints near the stream," he reported. "The trail leads into the deep forest, but the rain washed away most of the tracks after 50 meters. Sang-min studied the map on the wall. The camping ground was marked with a green circle. Beyond it, the forest stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Somewhere in that green wilderness was his 8-year-old niece. "We launch a full search at first light," Sang-min decided. "Every available person. Aerial units, ground teams, tracking dogs. We bring her home." But Dong-woo shook his head. "The dogs will not help. The storm has washed away all scent trails, and the aerial units cannot see through the forest canopy. We will have to track her the old way, step by step." As the adults planned the search, Jiho was discovering that the forest was not empty. Strange sounds came from the darkness between the trees. Rustling bushes that might hide watching eyes. Soft footsteps that stopped whenever she tried to listen. She was not alone, but she did not know what was sharing the forest with her. The trees on Kepler 442b were different from Earth trees. They grew taller, their branches twisted in unusual patterns. Some had leaves that glowed softly in the dark, creating patches of blue and green light. Others had bark that felt warm to the touch. Jiho had read about these trees in school, but seeing them up close was both beautiful and scary. She found a hollow at the base of a giant tree. The space was big enough for her to crawl inside and sit up. The hollow was dry and felt safe. Jiho decided to stay there until morning when she could see better and maybe find her way back to the settlement. But as night fell completely, the forest came alive with sounds. Howls in the distance, probably from the wolf-like creatures that hunted in packs. Clicking noises from insects the size of her hand. Splashing from the stream, where something large was drinking water. Jiho pulled her knees to her chest and tried not to cry. Crying would not help her find her way home. Crying would only make the scary sounds seem louder. She thought about her mother and uncle, probably looking for her right now. She thought about her warm bed back in the settlement with its soft blankets and familiar smells. Then she heard a new sound. Footsteps. But not the small, quick steps of the forest animals she had been hearing. These were large, heavy steps that made the ground shake slightly. Something big was moving through the trees, coming closer to her hiding place. Jiho held her breath and stayed very still. The footsteps stopped right outside her hollow tree. For a long moment, there was complete silence. Then she saw them. 2 glowing amber eyes looking directly at her through the darkness. The albino panther had found her. The creature was even bigger than the stories had described. Its white fur seemed to glow in the strange light from the trees. Its muscles moved under its skin like thick ropes. When it opened its mouth, Jiho could see teeth as long as her fingers. This was the monster that had killed 47 people. This was the terror of 3 settlements. But the panther did not attack. It stood at the entrance to the hollow, looking at her with those intelligent amber eyes. Jiho could see her reflection in them, small and scared and alone. The creature tilted its head to one side, as if it was thinking about something. Minutes passed. The panther did not move. Jiho did not move. They watched each other in the strange, glowing darkness of the alien forest. Finally, Jiho realized that she was not breathing. She took a shaky breath, and the sound seemed loud in the silence. The panther's ears moved at the sound. It took a step closer to the hollow. Jiho pressed herself against the back wall of her hiding place, but there was nowhere to go. The creature's head was now close enough that she could feel its warm breath on her face. "Please do not hurt me," Jiho whispered. "I am lost. I want to go home to my mama." The panther's eyes seemed to soften at the sound of her voice. It made a soft rumbling sound, not a growl, but something gentler. Then it did something that made no sense at all. The great white beast lay down in front of the hollow tree, blocking the entrance with its body. At first, Jiho thought the creature was trapping her inside. But as the minutes passed, she realized something different was happening. The panther was not keeping her in. It was keeping other things out. The sounds of the forest had stopped. The howls and clicking and splashing had all gone silent. Nothing would come near the hollow tree while the albino panther was there. The creature's body gave off warmth. Jiho could feel it even from inside the hollow. The white fur looked soft, like the expensive blankets in the settlement's finest homes. Despite her fear, Jiho felt her eyes growing heavy. She had been awake for many hours, and the stress of being lost had exhausted her small body. As she began to fall asleep, Jiho heard the panther making that soft rumbling sound again. It sounded almost like purring, the way a house cat might purr when it was content. But this was no house cat. This was the most feared predator on Kepler 442b, and it was guarding a lost little girl as she slept. When Jiho woke up hours later, the first thing she noticed was that she was no longer cold. The second thing she noticed was that she was no longer in the hollow tree. She was lying on something soft and warm that moved gently up and down with breathing. She was sleeping on the albino panther's back. The creature had somehow moved her during the night without waking her. Now she was curled up in the thick white fur between the panther's shoulder blades. The beast was walking slowly through the forest, carrying her like a mother carries a sleeping child. Jiho should have been terrified. She should have screamed and tried to run. But something about the panther's gentle movements and the way it had protected her during the night made her feel safe instead of scared. This creature could have killed her easily, but it had chosen to help her instead. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. The panther's ears turned toward the sound of her voice, but it did not stop walking. It seemed to know exactly where it was going, following paths that Jiho could not see. The morning sun was rising through the trees, creating patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. For the first time since she had become lost, Jiho felt hope. The albino panther was not the monster from the stories. It was something else, something that understood that she was just a lost child who needed help. Whatever it was, wherever it was taking her, she trusted it to keep her safe. The morning sun painted the forest in gold and green as search teams spread out from Settlement Alpha 7. Sungmin led the main group, while Dongwoo took a smaller team to follow the faint tracks he had found near the stream. Every person in the settlement who could walk and carry a radio had joined the search. "Grid pattern search," Sungmin ordered through his radio. "Stay in visual contact with your partner at all times. Report every 5 minutes. If you find anything at all, call it in immediately." The helicopters could not help much. The forest canopy was too thick, and the storm had washed away heat signatures that might show where Jiho had gone. The searchers would have to do this the hard way, on foot, calling her name and hoping she was still alive to answer. Meanwhile, 20 kilometers deeper in the forest, Jiho was discovering that her unlikely guardian was full of surprises. The albino panther moved through the wilderness with purpose, following paths that seemed to exist only in its mind. When Jiho grew thirsty, the creature brought her to a hidden spring where clear water bubbled up from underground. "How did you know this was here?" Jiho asked as she cupped the cool water in her hands. The panther watched her drink, its amber eyes alert for any danger. When she was finished, it nuzzled her gently with its massive head, then lay down so she could climb onto its back again. As they traveled, Jiho began to notice things about her guardian that the stories had never mentioned. The creature was covered in old scars, some thin lines and others thick ugly marks that spoke of terrible battles. But despite its fearsome appearance, it moved with incredible gentleness when she was near. When they came to a river too wide for the panther to jump, it waded across slowly, keeping its back level so Jiho would not fall into the rushing water. When thorny bushes blocked their path, the creature used its body to push them aside, getting scratched so that Jiho would not be hurt. Most surprising of all was how the panther behaved around other animals. A pack of wolf creatures approached them near midday, their teeth bared and eyes hungry. Jiho tensed, expecting a fight. But the albino panther simply looked at the pack leaders, and they immediately backed away. It did not need to roar or show its claws. Its presence alone was enough to make other predators retreat. But when they passed a group of small deer-like animals drinking at a stream, the panther ignored them completely. It could have easily caught and killed them for food, but it seemed to have no interest in hunting for sport. Jiho began to understand that her guardian only used violence when it was absolutely necessary. Back at the settlement, Hyejin sat in the medical center, unable to work, but unable to rest. Other doctors and nurses brought her food and tea, but she could not eat. Her daughter had been missing for over 24 hours. In the wilderness of Kepler 442b, that was a very long time. "Any word from the search teams?" she asked when Sang-min returned to check on her. "Dongwu found some tracks heading toward the old mining area," Sang-min reported. "But they are old tracks, maybe from yesterday. The storm made tracking very difficult." What Sang-min did not tell his sister was what Dongwu had really found. Mixed with Jiho's small footprints were the unmistakable tracks of the Albino Panther. The creature was following the lost child, and everyone knew what that meant. By now, Jiho was probably dead. But Dongwu was not so sure. He had been tracking the panther for 8 years, and he knew its hunting patterns. When the creature killed, it did so quickly and left evidence behind. Bodies were found within hours, usually near where the attack happened. But there was no blood at the scene, no signs of struggle, no body. "Something is different," the old hunter muttered to himself as he studied the tracks. "The panther was here, but this does not look like a hunt." The tracks told a strange story. The panther had approached the hollow tree where Jiho had hidden, but then it had settled down for several hours. In the morning, both sets of tracks continued together, heading deeper into the forest. Not the tracks of a predator dragging prey, but of two beings traveling side by side. Dongwu had never seen anything like it. In all his years of tracking the albino panther, the creature had never shown protective behavior toward humans. It killed armed adults and avoided civilians, but it had never actively helped anyone. As the second day of travel began, Jiho was learning more about her guardian's intelligence. The panther seemed to understand her basic needs without being told. When she was hungry, it brought her fruit from trees she could not reach. When she was tired, it found comfortable places to rest. When she was scared by strange noises in the forest, it made that soft rumbling sound that helped her feel safe. But the most amazing thing was how the creature communicated with her. It could not speak, but it used body language and gentle touches to show her what it wanted. When it was time to move, it would stand and look at her expectantly. When danger was near, it would lower its body and point its ears toward the threat. "You are not like the stories say," Jiho told the panther as they rested beside a small waterfall. "The people in the settlement think you are a monster, but you are not. You are kind." The panther's response surprised her. For the first time, it made a sound that was clearly sad, a low, mournful noise that seemed to come from deep in its chest. Jiho saw something in its amber eyes that looked almost like tears. "Are you lonely?" she asked softly. The creature lowered its great head and allowed her to pet the soft fur between its ears. The sadness in its eyes grew deeper, and Jiho realized that her guardian might be the loneliest creature on the planet. It was too dangerous for humans to approach, too intelligent to be truly wild, too unique to have others of its kind. That afternoon, they came to a place Jiho had never seen before. Hidden in a valley between tall hills was what looked like the ruins of buildings. But these were not human buildings. The shapes were wrong, the materials strange. Vines and trees had grown over most of the structures, but Jiho could still see that they had once been important. The albino panther stopped at the edge of the ruins and would not go closer. It sat on its haunches and stared at the overgrown buildings with what looked like fear in its eyes. Whatever this place was, it held bad memories for her guardian. "What happened here?" Jiho asked, but the panther only made that sad sound again. As they camped that night near the mysterious ruins, Jiho began to put together pieces of a puzzle. Her guardian was clearly not a normal animal. Its intelligence was too high, its behavior too complex. The scars on its body looked like they came from medical procedures, not natural fights, and the way it reacted to the ruins suggested that this place was connected to its past somehow. "Someone hurt you here, did they not?" Jiho said as she settled down to sleep against the panther's warm side. "That is why you are afraid of people with weapons. You think they want to hurt you again." The panther's breathing changed, becoming slower and deeper. It was falling asleep, but even in sleep it kept one ear pointed toward the ruins, as if expecting danger to emerge from the overgrown buildings. On the third morning, Jiho woke to find her guardian pacing nervously at the edge of their camp. The creature's ears were pointed toward the sky, and its muscles were tense with anxiety. Then Jiho heard what had disturbed it, the distant sound of helicopters. The search teams were getting closer. The panther looked at Jiho with an expression that seemed almost human in its worry. It knew that the approaching helicopters meant armed humans, and armed humans meant danger. But it also seemed to understand that Jiho needed to return to her own kind. For the first time since they had been together, the albino panther seemed uncertain about what to do. It wanted to protect Jiho, but it also wanted to keep her safe from the people who would surely try to kill it if they found them together. Jiho made the decision for both of them. She climbed onto the panther's back and pointed toward the sound of the helicopters. "Take me to them," she said firmly, "but stay hidden. I will make sure they do not hurt you." The panther hesitated for a moment, then began moving toward the sound of the search. As they traveled, Jiho tried to think of a way to explain what had happened. How could she tell the adults that the monster they feared had actually saved her life? How could she make them understand that the albino panther was not evil, just misunderstood and terribly alone? She did not know the answers to these questions, but she knew one thing for certain. She would not let anyone hurt her guardian. The creature had protected her when she was lost and helpless. Now it was her turn to protect it from the fear and hatred of her own kind. As the sound of helicopters grew louder, Jiho held tight to the white fur and prepared to face the most difficult challenge of her young life. She had to convince the adults to see past their fear and recognize the truth about the albino panther. The creature was not a monster. It was a victim, a prisoner of its own tragic past, and possibly the most intelligent and gentle being on the entire planet. The only question was whether anyone would believe an 8-year-old girl. On the third day of her journey with the albino panther, Jiho made a discovery that would change everything. Her guardian had brought her back to the valley with the ruined buildings, but this time it did not stop at the edge. Instead, it carried her directly to the largest structure, a building that was less damaged than the others. "You want me to go inside?" Jiho asked. The panther nodded its great head, something Jiho had never seen any animal do before. It lowered itself to the ground so she could climb down, then nudged her gently toward a doorway that was partially hidden by hanging vines. Inside the building, Jiho found something incredible. The walls were covered with screens and control panels, most of them dark and broken, but some still glowed with soft blue light, showing that power still flowed through this ancient place. This was not just a ruin. It was some kind of laboratory or research center. As Jiho explored deeper into the building, she found rooms filled with strange equipment. tables with metal restraints, cages that were far too large for normal animals, medical instruments that looked designed to cause pain rather than healing. Whatever had happened in this place, it had not been good. In the deepest room, Jiho found something that made her gasp. A computer terminal that was still working, its screen displaying information in letters she could read. The words at the top of the screen made her heart race. Subject Alpha 7 Behavioral Analysis. With careful fingers, Jiho touched the screen. More words appeared, telling a story that was both sad and terrible. Subject Alpha 7 was described as a genetically enhanced predator that had been modified for intelligence augmentation and emotional capacity expansion. The reports were full of technical words that Jiho did not understand, but the pictures made everything clear. Photos showed a young panther, not yet fully grown, strapped to metal tables while scientists worked on it. Other images showed the creature in cages, its eyes already showing the intelligence that would make it so different from other animals. As Jiho read more, she learned that Subject Alpha 7 had not been the only creature in this facility. There had been others, dozens of them, all being changed and modified by scientists who wanted to create enhanced biological weapons. But something had gone wrong with the project. The final reports talked about subject behavioral deterioration and aggressive responses to facility personnel. The scientists had been afraid of their own creations. The last entry in the computer was dated 10 years ago, and it was an evacuation order. The facility was being abandoned, and all research subjects were to be terminated. But Subject Alpha 7 had escaped before the termination order could be carried out. It had broken free from its cage and fled into the wilderness, leaving behind the only home it had ever known. A home where it had been tortured and experimented on by the very species it now feared. Jiho sat back from the computer screen, her young mind trying to process what she had learned. The albino panther was not a natural creature at all. It was the result of human experimentation, enhanced with intelligence and emotions but then abandoned when the project failed. No wonder it attacked people with weapons. No wonder it seemed so lonely and sad. The sound of helicopters was getting louder. Now the search teams were very close. Jiho quickly pressed buttons on the computer, trying to save the information she had found. She managed to copy some of the files onto a small device she found on the desk, just as her guardian appeared in the doorway. The panther looked agitated. Its ears were flat against its head, and its amber eyes kept glancing toward the ceiling as the helicopter sounds grew louder. It was clearly terrified of being found by armed humans, but it had brought Jiho here because it wanted her to know the truth. "I understand now," Jiho said softly, approaching the creature. "They hurt you here. The scientists hurt you and then left you alone. That is why you are afraid of people with guns." The panther made that sad sound again, but this time Jiho heard something else in it. Relief. After 10 years of being hunted and feared, someone finally understood its story. Outside, the helicopters were landing. Jiho could hear voices shouting orders and the sound of boots on the ground. The search teams had found the valley. "They are looking for me," Jiho told her guardian. "But they will try to kill you if they see you. You need to hide." The panther shook its massive head. It would not leave her, not even to save itself. For 3 days, it had protected her from every danger in the wilderness. It would not stop now, even though the approaching humans represented the greatest danger of all. Jiho made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of running toward the voices of the search teams, she climbed onto the panther's back one more time. "Take me to them," she said. "But we do this together. I will not let them hurt you." The albino panther hesitated for a long moment, then began walking toward the entrance of the building. As they emerged into the daylight, Jiho could see the search team spreading out across the valley. There were at least 20 people, all carrying weapons, all looking for her. The first person to spot them was Dongwu Chang. The old hunter had been examining tracks near the edge of the ruins when movement caught his eye. He looked up to see the impossible sight of a small girl riding on the back of the most feared predator on the planet. Here, Dongwu called to the others, his voice strangely calm. I found her. The other searchers turned toward his voice, and then stopped in shock. Sangmin was the first to react, raising his weapon and taking aim at the panther, but Jiho's voice stopped him. Do not shoot, she called out. Please, Uncle Sangmin. It will not hurt anyone. It saved me. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. 20 armed adults faced a little girl and the creature that had haunted their nightmares for 10 years. The albino panther stood perfectly still, not showing any aggression despite being surrounded by its enemies. Slowly, carefully, Jiho climbed down from the panther's back. She walked toward the search team, holding the data device she had taken from the laboratory. I know what it is, she announced. I know why it acts the way it does. It is not a monster. It is just scared and lonely. Sangmin kept his weapon trained on the panther, but his eyes were on his niece. Jiho, move away from that thing slowly. It is dangerous. No, Jiho said firmly. It is not dangerous to people who do not try to hurt it. Look at me, Uncle Sangmin. Look at me. I have been with it for 3 days and it never hurt me once. It protected me, it fed me. It kept me warm at night. The panther had not moved since Jiho dismounted. It sat on its haunches like a giant house cat, watching the humans with those intelligent amber eyes, but everyone could see the tension in its muscles, the readiness to fight if attacked. Dongwu slowly lowered his rifle. As the most experienced tracker, he had noticed things the others missed. The panther could have killed all of them by now, if it wanted to. It could have attacked while they were scattered and searching. Instead, it had delivered Jiho safely back to them. What did you find in there? Dongwu asked, nodding toward the ruined building. Jiho held up the data device. Proof, she said. Proof that it used to be a normal panther until scientists changed it. They made it smart and gave it feelings, then they abandoned it when they got scared of what they had created. She began to tell them everything she had learned from the computer files, how Subject Alpha 7 had been captured as a young animal and subjected to genetic modifications, how it had been tortured and experimented on for years, how it had escaped when the facility was evacuated, only to find itself alone in a world that feared and hunted it. It attacks people with weapons because weapons remind it of the scientist who hurt it, Jiho explained. But it has never hurt unarmed people because it knows they are not the ones who caused it pain. As Jiho spoke, the adults began to see the albino panther in a new light. Instead of a mindless killing machine, they saw a victim of human cruelty, a creature that had been given intelligence and emotions, then abandoned to survive on its own, in a hostile world. The panther seemed to understand that Jiho was defending it. It made that soft rumbling sound she had heard so many times during their journey together. Not a growl of threat, but a sound of gratitude and affection. It is trying to say, thank you, Jiho said, looking back at her guardian. No one has ever stood up for it before. Sangmin slowly lowered his weapon, though he kept it ready. Even if what you say is true, Jiho, it has killed 47 people. It is still dangerous. Only to people who threatened it first, Jiho replied. Every person it killed was carrying a weapon and hunting it. It was defending itself the same way any of us would. The standoff continued as the adults struggled to accept what they were hearing. Everything they thought they knew about the albino panther was wrong. It was not a monster but a victim, not a mindless killer but an intelligent being trying to survive in a world that wanted it dead. Finally, it was Heejin who broke the silence. Jiho's mother had arrived with the second wave of searchers, and she had heard her daughter's entire explanation. Can you prove what you found in there? Heejin asked, pointing to the data device. Jiho nodded eagerly. Everything is here. All the reports, all the pictures, all the proof that it was created by humans and then abandoned. As the truth began to sink in, the mood of the search team changed. Anger replaced fear as they realized what had really happened. The albino panther was not the villain in this story. The real villains were the scientists who had created it and then left it to suffer alone for 10 years. But the most important change was in how they looked at the creature itself. Instead of seeing a monster, they began to see a victim who deserved their help rather than their hatred. The question now was what to do about it. The albino panther seemed to sense the change in the humans' attitudes. For the first time in 10 years, it was not being hunted or feared. It was being understood. The creature's amber eyes held something that looked very much like hope. The journey back to Settlement Alpha 7 was unlike anything the search team had ever experienced. Instead of carrying a rescued child and hunting a dangerous predator, they found themselves escorting both the child and the creature that had protected her. The albino panther walked beside the group, no longer hiding in the shadows but moving openly among the humans who had hunted it for so long. Jiho rode sometimes on her uncle's shoulders and sometimes on her guardian's back. The sight of a little girl switching between a human adult and the most feared predator on the planet would have been unbelievable just hours before. Now it seemed perfectly natural. Dongwu stayed close to the panther, studying its behavior with professional interest. In all his years of tracking, he had never seen an animal adapt so quickly to new circumstances. The creature that had once avoided humans at all costs was now walking calmly among them, even allowing some of the braver searchers to approach and examine its scars. "Look at these marks," Hyojin said as she studied the panther's injuries with her medical training. "These are not battle wounds. These are surgical scars. Someone cut into this creature many times, probably without proper pain relief. The evidence of the panther's suffering was written across its body. Thin lines where monitoring devices had been implanted, thicker scars where tissue samples had been taken, burns that looked like they came from electrical testing. Every mark told the story of scientific cruelty that had lasted for years. But despite its painful past, the panther showed no aggression toward the humans examining it. It seemed to understand that these people were different from the scientists who had tortured it. When one of the searchers accidentally pressed too hard on a sensitive scar, the creature simply moved away without any threat display. "It has remarkable self-control," Sangmin observed. "Any normal animal would have attacked by now if strangers were touching its injuries." "It is not a normal animal," Jiho reminded him. "The scientists made it smarter than normal animals. Smart enough to know that we are trying to help, not hurt." The news of Jiho's rescue had already reached Settlement Alpha 7 through radio reports, but the news that she had been protected by the albino panther and that the creature was not. What everyone had believed was harder to accept. By the time the group reached the settlement's edge, hundreds of people had gathered to see for themselves. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some people stepped back in fear when they saw the massive white predator walking calmly among the search team. Others pushed forward, curious to get a better look at the legendary creature. A few brave children asked if they could pet it, though their parents quickly pulled them back. "Stay calm, everyone," Sangmin announced through his radio. "The situation is under control. The creature is not aggressive, but we need to keep some distance until we can sort everything out." The Colonial Administration Building became the center of intense activity. Officials, scientists, and security personnel gathered to examine the evidence Jiho had found in the abandoned laboratory. The data device contained thousands of files documenting the illegal experiments that had created Subject Alpha 7. Dr. Park, the settlement's chief scientist, spent hours reviewing the genetic modification reports. "This is incredible," he said finally. "They did not just enhance the creature's intelligence, they gave it the capacity for complex emotions, problem-solving abilities, and even something resembling a moral sense." "What does that mean?" Hyojin asked. "It means the panther can feel guilt, empathy, loneliness, and grief just like humans do," Dr. Park explained. "That is why it never attacked civilians. Its enhanced moral capacity prevented it from harming innocent people." The revelation changed everything. The albino panther was not just an intelligent animal. It was closer to being a person trapped in an animal's body. The ethical implications were staggering. While the adults debated in the administration building, Jiho sat outside with her guardian. The panther had positioned itself so that she could lean against its warm side while they waited. Other children from the settlement watched from a safe distance, amazed that their friend was sitting so calmly with the creature from their worst nightmares. "What will happen to you now?" Jiho asked softly, scratching behind the panther's ears the way she had learned it liked. The creature made that rumbling sound that meant contentment, but its amber eyes showed worry. It had lived as a hunted outcast for 10 years. The idea of being accepted by humans seemed too good to be true. Inside the building, the debate was intense. Some officials argued that the panther was still dangerous, regardless of how it had been created. Others insisted that it deserved protection as a victim of human cruelty. The evidence was clear that illegal experiments had taken place, but what to do about the result was not so obvious. "We cannot just pretend this creature does not exist," argued Dr. Park. "It has human-level intelligence and emotions. We have a moral obligation to treat it as more than just an animal." "But it has killed 47 people," countered Security Chief Williams from Settlement Beta 3. "Enhanced or not, it is still a predator." Sang-min stood up to address the room. "Every person it killed was armed and hunting it. My niece spent 3 days with this creature, completely helpless, and it never harmed her once. It fed her, protected her, and brought her safely home. That is not the behavior of a mindless killer." The debate continued for hours. Outside, Ji-ho fell asleep against the panther's side as the sun began to set. The creature remained perfectly still, not wanting to disturb her rest. Several colonists who had been watching from windows began to see the panther differently. It was hard to fear something that was being so gentle with the sleeping child. Finally, the officials reached a decision. The panther would be granted protected status as a unique being, rather than classified as either a dangerous animal or a scientific specimen. It would be allowed to live freely in the wilderness, but with certain conditions. The settlement would establish regular contact to monitor its well-being, and in return, the creature would help protect the area from other dangerous predators. When Ji-ho woke up, her uncle was standing beside her with good news. "The officials have decided that your guardian can stay," he told her. "It will be protected by law. No one is allowed to hunt it anymore." Ji-ho hugged the panther's massive neck, feeling tears of relief on her cheeks. "Did you hear that? You are safe now. You do not have to hide anymore." The panther's response was unlike anything it had ever done before. It stood up carefully, making sure Ji-ho was steady on her feet, then lowered its great head in what could only be described as a bow. It was thanking the humans for their mercy and understanding. Over the following weeks, a new relationship developed between the settlement and the albino panther. The creature, which Ji-ho had named Baek, meaning white in Korean, maintained its territory in the deep forest but occasionally visited the settlement's edge. It became an unofficial guardian, warning the colonists of dangerous weather and driving away hostile wildlife. Children who had once been terrified of the panther began leaving small gifts of food at the forest edge. Beck would always accept these offerings gracefully, seeming to understand that they represented friendship rather than pity. In return, it would sometimes leave interesting stones or unusual flowers where the children could find them. Dongwoo, the old hunter, became Beck's primary human contact. The two former enemies developed a mutual respect based on their shared understanding of the wilderness. Dongwoo taught the settlement's children about Baek's behavior and helped them understand how to interact safely with their unusual neighbor. "Remember," Dongwoo would tell them, "Baek is not a pet. It is a person in a panther's body. Treat it with the same respect you would show any adult." The abandoned laboratory was converted into a research station dedicated to studying ethical treatment of enhanced creatures. Dr. Park led a team that worked to understand exactly what had been done to Baek and how to help it live the best life possible. They also searched for any other subjects that might have escaped from similar facilities. As months passed, Baek's presence became a source of pride for Settlement Alpha 7. Other colonies sent representatives to learn how they had transformed a feared monster into a valued community member. The story spread across human space, becoming a symbol of how understanding and compassion could overcome fear and hatred. Ji-ho, now recognized as something of an expert on human-enhanced creature relationships, often gave presentations to visiting scientists and officials. She would stand beside Baek, her small hand resting on its massive head, as she explained what she had learned during their 3 days together in the wilderness. "The most important thing," she would always conclude, "is to remember that just because something looks different or scary does not mean it is evil. Sometimes the things we fear most are just lonely and need a friend." 2 years after their first meeting, Ji-ho had grown taller, and Bayek had grown grayer around the muzzle. But their bond remained as strong as ever. Every weekend, Jiho would visit the forest edge where Bayek waited for her. They would spend hours together, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. One evening, as they watched the two suns set behind the mountains, Jiho asked a question she had been thinking about for a long time. "Are you happy now, Beck? Do you feel like you belong somewhere?" The panther looked at her with those intelligent, amber eyes and made the rumbling sound that meant yes. But more than that, it pressed its great head against her shoulder in a gesture that needed no translation. For the first time in its enhanced life, Beck was not alone. The settlement had given the panther something more valuable than safety or food or shelter. They had given it acceptance, understanding, and most importantly, friendship. In return, Beck had shown them that the greatest strength of humanity was not in weapons or technology, but in the ability to see past fear and offer trust to those who needed it most. As the stars came out over Kepler 442b, a little girl and her unlikely guardian sat together at the edge of two worlds, human and wild, past and future, fear and understanding. They had found each other in the wilderness and discovered that sometimes the most important bridges are built not with machines or materials, but with simple acts of kindness and courage. The albino panther was feared by all no more. Now it was loved by many, protected by law, and cherished by one very special little girl who had seen past the monster to find the heart of a friend. In a universe often divided by differences, they had proven that understanding could triumph over fear, and that even the most unlikely friendships could change the world. The story of Jiho and Bayek became legend on Kepler 442b, told to each new generation of children as proof that courage comes in all sizes, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone who has never been trusted before. It was a reminder that in the vast darkness of space, the light of compassion could shine brighter than any star.